Christmas morning, the air thick with cinnamon and fake cheer, felt normal until my family started the usual jokes about my bohemian lifestyle, laughing as I unwrapped what looked suspiciously like a coupon book. But then, they opened their gifts and the smiles, they just melted right off their faces. It wasn't just what I gave, but what I revealed about who I really was, holding $5 million in investments. Things got really quiet, really fast, and that's when it all shifted, you know? Before we continue, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I'd love to know. Evie, darling. Come on in, don't just stand there, freeze your poor little nose off. That was my mom, Carol, her voice a little too bright, a little too loud, like she was trying to outsing the carols already blasting from the living room. It was Christmas Day, just like every other Christmas Day since I was small, held at my parents' house. The smell of pine and roasting turkey always mixed with something else, something I could never quite place. Maybe a hint of old resentment, a whiff of judgment. I pushed open the front door, stepping into the familiar chaos. My dad, David, was already on the couch, half asleep, a festive napkin draped over his chest like a bib. "Hey, sweet pea," he mumbled, blinking awake. He was always gentle, my dad, but he rarely spoke up when things got tense. And boy, did things get tense around the holidays, especially when my older sister, Brenda, and her husband, Stephen, arrived. They were already there, of course, Brenda's laugh echoing from the kitchen, a sharp, metallic sound that always put my teeth on edge. I took a deep breath, trying to push down the usual wave of anxiety. I loved my family, I really did, but our Christmases were less about cozy joy and more about a subtle competition, a silent tally of who was doing best. And I, Evie, the quiet one, the freelance designer who sometimes sold her art at local markets, was almost always at the bottom of that invisible list. They saw me as flaky, a bit lost, definitely not good with money. They didn't know the half of it. "Oh, Evie, you made it." Brenda swept in from the kitchen, a glass of something bubbly in her hand. Her hair was perfectly styled, her dress sparkly, like she was ready for a magazine shoot. "We were just talking about your ventures," she said, winking at Stephen, who chuckled on cue. "Heard you had a great turnout at the fall fair, though. Did you sell any of those charming little clay pots?" My face felt warm. "Yeah, I sold a few, Brenda." "It was good," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. My clay pots were actually quite popular, but in Brenda's world, if it wasn't a corporate ladder or a luxury car, it wasn't success. Aunt Martha, my mom's sister, emerged from the dining room, wiping her hands on a tea towel. She squinted at me over her reading glasses. "Evie, dear, still doing the art thing?" "Well, that's nice." She paused, letting the word hang in the air, thick with unspoken pity. "Your cousin, Daniel, just got promoted at his firm, you know. Another big bonus coming his way. He's so good with numbers, such a sensible boy." Daniel, her son, gave a small, uncomfortable half-smile from behind her. He was a decent guy, Daniel, but Martha always used him as a measuring stick for everyone else. The gift exchange started after lunch, as always. My stomach felt a little fluttery. I'd spent weeks on my gifts, handmade scarves for Mom and Aunt Martha, a custom-designed bookplate for Dad, a personalized journal for Brenda. They were thoughtful, made with care, but they weren't expensive. Brenda, of course, went first. "Oh, Mother. You shouldn't have," she squealed, unwrapping a diamond pendant. Then she handed Mom a fancy blender. To me, she gave a small, brightly wrapped box. Inside was a generic, mass-produced scented candle. "It's a sandalwood," she chirped. "I thought you'd like something calming for your creative space." It felt less like a gift and more like a gentle pat on the head, a reminder of my presumed simple life. Then it was my turn to open. My mom got me a new set of art brushes. Sweet. Dad gave me a book on local hiking trails. Also sweet. Aunt Martha's gift was a thick envelope. "It's a subscription to a financial planning magazine, dear," she announced, beaming. "Thought it might help you get a handle on things. Daniel highly recommends it." A polite cough escaped from Daniel. Stephen snickered. Brenda didn't even try to hide her grin. The laughter that followed wasn't loud, but it cut deep. It was the soft, knowing laughter of people who thought they had your whole life figured out, who saw you as a project, a well-intentioned failure. My cheeks burned. I clutched the magazine, its glossy cover mocking me. "Oh, Evie, you know we just worry about you," Carol said, coming over to pat my shoulder, oblivious to the sting. "It's just that, well, you're not getting any younger, and these creative pursuits, they don't always pay the bills, do they?" That's when Brenda decided to drop her bombshell. "Speaking of paying bills," she said, standing up dramatically, holding up her phone. "Steven and I just closed on a massive investment property. A duplex downtown, prime location. We're talking huge returns, practically guaranteed. We're calling it our Christmas miracle." She looked directly at me, a triumphant smirk on her face. "See, Evie, that's how you make your money work for you. Not with, well, you know, yarn and clay." Another ripple of polite, condescending laughter spread through the room. My family, my own family, was mocking me openly. They laughed at my financial magazine, at my creative pursuits, at my presumed inability to handle money. They saw me as the struggling artist, the one who needed help, the one who was always just a step behind. I felt a quiet click inside me. It wasn't anger, not really. It was a cold, hard resolve. I looked at Brenda, at her smug face, at Stephen's echoing chuckle, at Martha's pitying gaze, at my parents' worried glances. They didn't know who I was. They didn't know what I'd been quietly building year after year in the shadows of their assumptions. I closed my eyes for a split second, taking a slow breath. "That's wonderful, Brenda," I said, my voice flat, but underneath, something had irrevocably shifted. "Really, wonderful." I stood up, feigning a sudden headache. "You know, I think I'm going to head out. Got a bit of a migraine coming on." My family, of course, just nodded, used to my moods. They had no idea this was the last time they'd ever see that Evie. The quiet one. The one they laughed at. I walked out, the laughter fading behind me, and a quiet, powerful plan began to form in my mind. The drive home felt different that day. The usual frustration and sting of my family's remarks were still there, a dull ache, but underneath it, a new fire was burning. It wasn't a destructive fire, not a rage-filled inferno, but a steady, focused flame. They thought they knew me. They thought I was struggling. They thought my life was a charming, but ultimately impractical artistic endeavor. They were so wrong. I got back to my small apartment, the one they always subtly implied was quaint, but really meant cheap. It was neat, minimalist, and perfectly functional. Not a sign of struggle, but a testament to careful living and deliberate choices. I went straight to my home office, a tiny corner of my living room, and opened my laptop. On the screen, a clean, crisp spreadsheet glowed, rows and columns filled with numbers that told a very different story from the one my family believed. My investment portfolio. My secret. For years, ever since I graduated college and realized the art world wasn't an instant path to riches, I'd been learning. I dove into books, online courses, forums. I started small, saving every spare dollar from my freelance design work, my commissions, my art sales. While Brenda was buying designer handbags and new cars, I was buying index funds. While Martha tooted about my future, I was quietly building a future they couldn't even imagine. I lived well below my means, not out of necessity, but out of strategy. I loved my art, it was my passion, but I also understood the power of financial independence. The real shame was I was actually good at it. Very good. I leaned back in my chair, looking at the total value of my investments. It had grown steadily, sometimes explosively, over the years. My discipline, my patience, my relentless research, it had all paid off. That Christmas, watching my family mock me, the number on the screen felt like a fortress. A solid, unshakable truth that stood in stark contrast to their superficial judgments. I knew I had enough. More than enough. Far more than Brenda's big investment property. The next few months were a blur of work, art, and continued, diligent investment management. I kept my head down. I politely declined most family invitations. "Oh, busy with a big project," I'd say to Mom, knowing she'd relay it to Brenda and Martha, who would probably sigh dramatically about my unstable schedule. They wouldn't understand that these projects were bringing in excellent money, which then went right back into my growing portfolio. Sometimes Mom would call, her voice laced with thinly veiled concern. "Evie, honey, are you eating enough? Your dad and I were thinking of sending you a little something, just to help out with groceries." It was always disguised as care, but I knew the underlying message. "You're not doing well. We need to take care of you." I always politely declined, making up some excuse about having plenty. The thought of them helping out when I was sitting on millions was, well, it was almost funny. Almost. I heard snippets of family gossip, usually from Daniel, who, bless his heart, sometimes tried to be an ally. "Brenda's going on about her duplex again. Evie," he'd text, "says she's already made a fortune. She was asking if you've found your feet yet." I just typed back, "Tell her I'm still tiptoeing." Daniel understood my quiet humor. He knew there was more to me than met the eye, though he didn't know the full scope of my financial reality. The humiliation of that Christmas day, the sting of Brenda's mocking laughter, it hadn't faded. It had hardened into a quiet determination. I wasn't just working for myself anymore. I was working for a moment of vindication. A moment where they would see me, really see me, not through the lens of their outdated assumptions. Then, around late October, Mom called again. Her voice was softer this time, a little less frantic. "Evie, sweetheart, it's almost Christmas again, and, well, it just wasn't the same last year without you. It felt empty. Dad misses you, I miss you. Please say you'll come this year? Just for the day." I paused, holding the phone away from my ear for a moment. This was it. This was the opening I'd been waiting for. My heart gave a little thump, a mix of excitement and nerves. For a second, I thought about saying no again, about avoiding the whole charade. But then I pictured Brenda's smug face, Martha's pity, Stephen's snickers. No, this wasn't about avoiding them. This was about finally showing them. "Okay, Mom," I said, a smile slowly spreading across my face. "Okay, I'll come. I'd love to." There was a genuine sigh of relief from her end. "Oh, wonderful, Evie. That's just wonderful. I'll tell Brenda the good news." "Yeah, you do that," I said, my smile turning a little wider, a little sharper. This Christmas, things would be different. Very different. I wasn't just showing up. I was walking onto a stage I had painstakingly prepared. My plan began to solidify. I would bring gifts, yes, but the real gift would be the truth. And the package would be opened myself, right there, in front of everyone. I started making my usual thoughtful, handmade gifts, but this time, there was an added layer of meticulousness. A special kind of wrapping paper, a particular way to tie the bows. Every detail was part of the performance. For Brenda, I chose a small, elegant frame. For Martha, a beautifully bound, blank journal. Simple things, but carefully selected to contrast with the grand revelation I had planned. The tension began to hum under my skin, a low, steady thrum of anticipation. This wasn't just about money, it was about dignity. It was about seeing the look on their faces when they finally learned who I really was. The air crackled with a forced gaiety when I walked into my parents' living room that Christmas morning. It was the familiar scene, twinkling lights, the scent of cinnamon and stale gossip, and Brenda's laugh cutting through it all like a rusty knife. My mom, Carol, rushed to hug me, genuinely happy. My dad, David, gave me a warm, quiet smile. But the others, the others were exactly as I expected. Brenda, in a dress even sparklier than last year's, raised an eyebrow as I shrugged off my sensible, warm coat. "Evie, look at you. Still driving that old sedan, I see? Stephen and I just traded up to a new luxury SUV, much safer for the kids, you know." Her tone was light, but the jab landed precisely. Stephen, her husband, just gave me a dismissive glance. Aunt Martha, ever the watchful hawk, immediately started in. "Evie, dear, have you thought about your future? Daniel's talking about his retirement planning already, bless him. So responsible." Daniel actually looked a bit embarrassed this time, offering a small, apologetic shrug from across the room. The day wore on in its predictable rhythm of polite conversation, competitive one-upmanship from Brenda, and veiled pity from Martha. I just smiled, listened, and occasionally offered a non-committal, "Oh really?" or "That's nice." Inside, I felt a calm resolve. The stage was set. Finally, after a too-large lunch that left everyone groggy, it was time for the gift exchange. My family went first, as always. My gifts were opened with mild enthusiasm. Brenda got the elegant, empty frame. Martha received the beautiful, blank journal. Both accepted them with polite, if slightly confused, smiles. "Oh, how minimalist," Evie, Brenda said, holding up the frame. "Are you going to paint something for it?" Then it was my turn to open their presents for me. Mom gave me a lovely new set of sketching pencils. Dad, another book, this time on foraging. Sweet. Martha handed me a small box, tied with a simple ribbon. "It's a little something practical, dear," she announced. "Something you can always use." Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a small, rather ugly, hand-knitted pair of socks. They looked like they'd been dug out of a donation bin. Brenda, seeing my hesitant smile, leaned forward. "Oh, Evie, those are charming. So earthy. Good for you, always sticking to your roots. You know, Stephen and I just got back from our skiing trip in Aspen. The slopes were just incredible, darling. We thought about you, actually. Wondered if you'd ever be able to afford a trip like that." She punctuated this with a little, tinkling laugh. My parents looked a little uncomfortable, but no one said anything. The socks, the laughter, the implication that I was utterly unable to participate in their world, it was the perfect cue. I looked at the socks, then at Brenda, then around the room at the expectant faces, the nervous smiles. The moment had come. I took a deep breath, a natural pause, then exhaled slowly. "You know," I said, my voice clear and calm, cutting through the post-lunch haze, "Brenda, you're right. I haven't been to Aspen. But, actually, I brought a little something myself. A small update, you could say." I reached into my bag and pulled out a sleek, leather-bound portfolio. The entire room went quiet. I opened it, revealing not a painting, not a drawing, but a neatly printed, official-looking document. It wasn't a bank statement, too crude, but a summary from my wealth management firm, professionally compiled, showing a very precise figure. I held it up, not dramatically, but clearly visible. "This past year, I began my voice study. I've been very busy. Not just with my art, though that's going wonderfully. I've also been managing my investments." I paused, letting my gaze sweep over their faces. Brenda's grin had faltered, replaced by a confused frown. Martha was leaning forward, her eyes squinted, trying to read the document. My parents looked worried, wondering what I was about to confess. "You see," I continued, "for years I've been quietly building something. Something substantial. Something that, well, allows me to live quite comfortably, actually. And it's grown a lot. This document," I tapped it gently, "is a summary of my current portfolio. As of last week, it stands at just over $5 million in liquid investments." The room plunged into an absolute, deafening silence. It wasn't just quiet, it was like the air had been sucked out. Brenda's jaw literally dropped. Stephen, who had been idly scrolling on his phone, froze, his thumb hovering mid-screen. Martha's eyes, usually sharp with judgment, were wide, disbelieving. My parents stared, their faces a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension. "5 million. Brenda stammered, her voice a reedy whisper. "No, that can't be right." "Evie, what kind of joke is this?" I didn't laugh. I just looked at her calmly. "No joke, Brenda. These are real numbers. Real investments. I've been doing this for a long time, quietly. While everyone assumed I was struggling, I was actually thriving. I just didn't feel the need to broadcast it. Until now." Martha found her voice first, a squeak. But you drive that old car. You never talk about fancy vacations. You wear such simple clothes." "Precisely," I said, a small, knowing smile finally touching my lips. "I live simply by choice, not by necessity. Because that's how you make $5 million grow into $5 million. And then some." I looked at the ugly socks in my lap. And frankly, I didn't want to explain myself to people who would only judge me for not spending it, or for spending it differently than they would. Brenda, regaining some composure, tried to pivot. Evie, darling. We always knew you were so clever. So shrewd. We just thought you were focusing on your art. This is amazing news. Oh, you must tell us all your secrets. Stephen, honey, didn't I always say Evie had a head for figures? Stephen, still pale, weakly agreed. Why yes, darling, you always said that. I looked at them, then at my parents, who were now looking at me with a mixture of pride and profound shame. The mockery was gone. The pity was gone. Replaced by an almost desperate eagerness, an obvious attempt to rewrite history. It's not about secrets, Brenda, I said, letting my gaze settle on her. It's about hard work, discipline, and not needing external validation. Something I learned, perhaps, by being constantly underestimated. I took a deep breath, the air now thick with unspoken apologies and uncomfortably shifted perspectives. I kept it quiet because I wanted to see if anyone would value me for who I was, not for what I had. And clearly, the answer was enlightening. I stood up, the portfolio still in my hand. It's been quite a Christmas, hasn't it? I said, looking around the stunned room. My parents tried to apologize, their voices choked with emotion. I just shook my head gently. It's okay, Mom, Dad. It is what it is. I didn't gloat, I didn't shout. I simply stated my truth and watched their world, and their perception of me, crumble and rebuild in front of my eyes. This wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about self-respect. And for the first time, I felt truly, unequivocally free. I walked to the door, a sense of quiet triumph settling over me. Merry Christmas, everyone. I hope you enjoy your gifts. This moment of quiet strength, of finally owning my truth, was the most important gift I've ever given myself. It taught me that true value isn't in what others see, but in what you know about yourself, and sometimes, you just have to open your own damn gifts.